We can have kids be straight A students, complete their A through G requirements. They get to college and all of their classes are remedial because when they take the college placement tests, they are not at a college level. There's major grade inflation.
So idea is that right now, some of the schools might be giving A's and B's to students that might be C's and D's.
Absolutely.
I graduated really well. I had A's and B's and AP English classes, but then I was in remedial English when I went to university.
When I go to a board meeting, it is so rare that you actually hear, how are students doing? One of our parent leaders was at those meetings and she said, she got really emotional because she said, when are people gonna shut down the meeting for my kids? You know, for kids that look like my son, you know, my black son.
My guest today is Kimi Kean, who has had decades of experience working in the Oakland school system as a teacher, principal, and superintendent. Today, she'll share with us some of the problems she's witnessed in California's public school system, including grade inflation, mismanagement of funds, and lack of focus on kids' academic achievements. In the past decade, the cost per student dramatically increased in California, going from $10,000 per student per year to now over $23,000 per student per year. Yet the proficiency rates have not improved much. We also talked to Charles Cole, who has attended 11 public schools growing up in the Bay Area. He was facing homelessness and is advocating for the kids in public schools.
Based on how many kids read at grade level, looking at third grade reading data, determine how many prison beds they're going to need to build. Because there's such a strong correlation between early reading and what happens later in life with student success.
I'm Siyamak. Welcome to California Insider.
Kimi, it's great to have you on. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We are very excited to talk to you about education because this has been a big topic for us at California Insider. Californians, we care about education.
Yep.
Everything that comes on the ballot, people vote for it.
Mm-hmm.
We want to give funding to education. But there's a big discrepancy between what's happening in the schools and the results we're getting out of schools and the amount of heart and effort we put into it. As a society here in California. You have been an educator in Oakland for many years, and you've been through the education system from being a teacher to being a principal and superintendent. Can you tell us more about why is this discrepancy and what's going on with education first in Oakland?
That's right. Well, thanks for the great question. And we agree with you. In Oakland, what's been happening, why we founded our organization is we have incredible discrepancy between students who are more affluent or students who are white and Asian versus students who are low income or happen to be Latino or Black. And we are really fighting for figuring out how do we close that gap. So currently, about 2 in 10 of our Black and brown students are reading at grade level across the city of Oakland, and it's about 1 in 10 in math. So it makes me so nervous because I think, what are all the careers out there? You know, how are you successful in college or career if you can't bring your proficiency up to grade level? And we're putting our students at a huge disadvantage, you know, for their life opportunities. Meanwhile, there's about a 40% gap with white and Asian students, and we got to figure that out. We can't be leaving entire groups of students behind. When I go to a board meeting, it is so rare that you actually hear, how are students doing in terms of their academic outcomes? And this is really confusing to me, and it's confusing to a lot of people because the whole point of a school district is to focus on educational outcomes. So they might be talking about contracts, or they might be talking about different policies, but what they're not doing is setting really clear goals to change that gap, to really bring kids up to grade level, and then monitoring it. And any leader knows you got to be clear about your goals, and then you have to come back and check the progress so you're on track, or if you need to make adjustments. And this is what we see needs to happen. Our board needs to get focused.
So what you're saying is the school board is actually not paying enough attention to the academic achievement of schools.
100%. 100%. I mean, a lot of boards and councils across the country have been facing a lot of protests and people really concerned about global foreign policies. And these issues are important, don't get me wrong. They're incredibly tragic things happening all over the world, but it's not the business of a school board. And it really diverts the focus from education and from closing some of these proficiency gaps that our school board has to deal with.
So like when they were planning to vote for Israel and Palestine resolution, and
that shut down several board meetings. And I remember one of our parent leaders was at those meetings, and she said, she got really emotional because she said, when are people going to shut down the meeting for my kids? You know, for kids that look like my son, you know, my Black son. While these issues are important, they're just not the work of the school board.
so do you think the fact that the boards are not focusing enough on the education, on the academic achievement, do you think that's trickling down to the schools? How does it manifest in the education system?
Absolutely. In any organization, in any business, right, you're only as good as your leader. So we work from the grassroots up, but also from the top down. And both of those, we need to be working in alignment, right, at all those different levels. It's very hard. It's very hard to move student achievement, right? But if we're not focused at each level, including the school board, it's not going to happen.
How does it impact the teachers?
They're all over the place. And so they need their principal to help them be focused. The principals need their supervisors to help them be focused, and up the ring. So, and then at the end of the day, we really believe the families, that's the most important accountability that's missing in the system, is that our schools are accountable to the families that they serve.
Did the parents know that the students are behind?
No, not enough. We think that gap, we think parents have a right to know. That's one of our values. The parents must know. They must understand their child's progress, what grade level looks like. Like every parent should know, my kid's in second grade, this is where they need to be by the end of second grade. And then they need to know how to partner with their teacher and also with their student, right? To be reading at home and doing other things to be partners in that progress. But this is what we're finding as we work. We're working with 10 different schools. We've trained about 600 parents in Oakland how to work with their kids, how to get involved and advocate for their children's education. And very commonly what we find is parents are shocked about the data because they really just haven't seen it. And even if they have seen the data, they didn't fully understand what it meant.
One of the things that comes to mind, did the parents you talk to, do they actually not have enough time? Or why do you think they're not as engaged in the school? Is it time? Is it not knowing what to do?
Yeah.
Is it a lot of trust in the school system?
I think it really starts with trust and relationship. If you yourself did not have a good experience in public education, the minute you set foot into your kid's school, you might feel a little apprehensive, right? Because you're remembering maybe some of the experiences you've had. We find through our work with families that is overwhelmingly the case. One parent told us just a couple weeks ago, she said one of her teachers when she was in school told her, I get paid whether you learn or not.
Wow.
That's so debilitating to a student, right? Her own self-esteem, her own, vision of herself as a learner, to have a teacher say something like that. And that's that doesn't happen every day, but that's the kind of thing that she's now a mom and she has an elementary school student. She's thinking about that when she goes into her kid's school. So in schools, we have to create the kind of trust and relationships where families feel welcomed and they feel warmly respected, right? But we say it can't stop there. Families have to understand the academic stakes, right? If you get behind in kinder, in first and second grade, in third grade, the prison system is basically measuring based on how many kids read at grade level, the prisons in third grade, looking at third grade reading data, determine how many prison beds they're going to need to build. Because there's such a strong correlation between early reading and what happens later in life with student success. So if we know that, don't we have to do everything we can to make sure our kids are reading at grade level by third grade?
And you mentioned that the boards are not really paying a lot of attention to this. So are they looking at that?
Well, I'm really excited. So in Oakland, we have two board members, Dr. Thompson and Director Lerma, have introduced a resolution to pass this policy that will set very clear goals to double the proficiency in math, to double the proficiency in reading, and then also to make sure not 50% of Black and brown students are eligible to apply to college, but 80% would be the goal that they want to put forward. So they're introducing this resolution to their colleagues and really helping their colleagues understand that part of making change is we got to look in the mirror and we got to think, how do we exercise as board members our agency to impact things that are just that important, like the students reading on grade level.
Now, Kimi, what about the other ones, the whites and Asians and others? How are they doing better than the Black and browns?
Yeah.
Is it because of the family, or what's the reason?
We find if your parents graduated from high school or went to college, you are much more likely to graduate from high school and go to college. But what we know is many of our Black and brown parents, even themselves, didn't get access to a great education, and that pattern persists. The the gaps are huge. They are huge.
So the proficiencies, the gap is that big. Why is that? It's like, where do you think is the root of that? Is it they're going to the same class, right?
Yeah.
Is it the different schools?
There's a lot of correlation. If you put our proficiency, one thing that we did to really motivate the parents was show them, if you map out the schools in the city, just geographically on a map, you can see more of almost all the schools that are green schools where there's a lot of proficiency. They're in the higher income areas of the city.
So the low income schools are not doing well.
That's right.
They're doing really bad then.
So you tend to have newer teachers, right? Less prepared, less experienced, more going on in the community that are needs, that distracts you and that requires more attention. And so it's not that it can't happen. I mean, I certainly was part of a school in a very underserved community. We dealt with a lot of issues going on around the school, but you have to figure it out. That's not an excuse not to do well. We have to provide the supports to make sure all kids get up to the goal.
Now, do you have any examples from when you were a teacher and principal? Were you guys able to help these kids achieve? And what was it like? Do you have any examples of things that almost look impossible?
Absolutely. I remember a student with really severe disabilities who came into our school in kindergarten. His doctor said, look, he's just really not going to be able to learn very much. We're just going to integrate him so he can have a good experience in school. We partnered as a team. We worked so closely with that family as we worked with the medical staff that he had. That kid soared. He was reading on grade level by first grade. He astounded everybody. And, that was a case where we know we can make a difference. When we get focused, when we focus in on what a student needs, that team of adults can really make it happen.
There is a phenomenon that we're hearing that some of the grades that kids are getting, they cannot be trusted. Is that common in the school system now?
This is a national issue right now that's really being flagged in the national media. Parents across our country overestimate how well their kids are doing in school. This tells us something is broken within our education system in the way that we're communicating with parents. We can have kids be straight A students, complete their A through G requirements. They get to college and all of their classes are remedial because when they take the college placement tests, they are not at a college level. So this is happening constantly, and it's actually one of the reasons that first-generation kids, low-income kids of color who get to college don't stay in college because it's so detrimental, embarrassing, shameful. I felt that when I got to college and I couldn't do the work. It's such an assault kind of on your self-esteem when you get there and you can't even write an essay that is a passing essay in your English class, right, at a college level. So we have this huge disconnect between these grades that are getting sent home and the actual proficiency level.
Folks, you've probably been hearing me talk about Verify for a while now. Verify has been getting a ton of phone calls from you, and I thank you for supporting an investment that actually helps people. A lot of people are talking about this investment, and I like to review the basics with you. First off, yes, it's true. You can earn up to 10.25% fixed rate of return that's not correlated to the stock market or to the Fed. You can turn your income on or off, compound it, whatever you choose, and there are absolutely no fees. There are no restrictions on your principal if you ever need your money back, and you'll get your monthly statement with no surprises. If you are not sure if you can trust this economy, this secure collateralized portfolio may be a very good option for you. Just go to investyrefi.com. That's invest, the letter Y, then refi.com. Folks, I take my endorsements very seriously. If you're looking for a solid investment that helps people, contact my friends at YRefi and then tell them Siyamak Karami sent you. Now let's go back to the interview.
So where is this disconnect? Is it that the schools are giving good grades or the tests are easier?
I think there's major, major grade inflation. And I think it starts in elementary school. That's why we're really a fan. Some schools and school systems, they very clearly communicate, here's the reading assessment. The reading assessment showed your kid is here, the grade level is here, here's how we're going to move your kid up, here's how we're going to work together. But that's why parents have to understand the data, not just the teachers. Oh, your kid's so nice, they're working so hard, got a B. What does that B mean? Right? Is that B based on an assessment?
Is that B a really C or a D, or is
Correct.
it a B
That's
as
right.
a real B?
That's right. In fact, since it's such a systemic problem, we need to really rethink grades to make sure that the real and correct information is getting to parents and students, because once they know the reality, they're motivated
They're
to
going to
act.
do better. They have to do
Yes.
better. So idea is that right now, some of the schools might be giving A's and B's to students that might be C's and D's.
Absolutely.
And-
Absolutely. I have people on my team who will tell me that's exactly what happened to them. They went to school in Oakland. They graduated, top of their class, went to college, remedial English, remedial math. My one, you take the class over and over and over again until you can actually pass it. We shouldn't put kids through that, because for our most vulnerable kids, that means they're just going to quit, right? Because they don't want to keep taking that class over and over. They want to go to the college level class. And it's embarrassing, right? To get to college and not be at the grade level that is required for you to be successful. Charles, he and I got together. We were part of the founding team of Families in Action. And in the first year and a half, he and I got in front of about 2,000 high school students to talk to them about college eligibility and to actually share the data for Black and Brown students that just about under 50% were eligible to apply to a college. And kids, their minds were blown. They said, we had no idea. How come nobody told us this? I got to go talk to my cousin who goes to this other school where they have really low A through G rates. I got to tell him and make sure he's getting into the right classes so that he won't be left out of being able to apply to college. Charles has a great story for himself about how he was able to complete A through G, but his cousin wasn't. And his cousin ended up going into the military and served 3 tours in Iraq. Right? These are life and death decisions for our kids, whether they're actually able to apply and go to college, right?
And we had a chance to talk to Charles, which we're going to share.
My parents were addicts until they weren't. Went to about 11 elementary schools. Grew up homeless. Lived in 2 shelters in San Francisco, 2 in Oakland. And education really was the refuge. It was like, that was the thing that was going to get me, out of poverty. And it's something that when you go to that many schools, you start to notice differences and you notice things. And, I didn't go to the best schools. So when I became an adult and I got to see more and more schools, it became an easy career for me to pursue, just by having a lot of different experiences. But I know that, I come from people that have a high level of agency where you got to make things happen. And even when the system isn't doing what it needs to do, you gotta push on that system while at the same time having plans A, B, and C. And so that's a little bit about me.
What is the issues that the system has, the education system has, that you see
Well,
based on your experience and what you've studied?
Yeah, I think I have a ton. I think that when you can predict with a certain level of accuracy how well in life somebody is going to do education-wise by how much money they make, I think that is a sign of a rigged system. I think that if you don't know how to navigate this education system and take everything that you need from it, you're not going to get the things that you necessarily deserve. And so the system is inadequate in that the level of quality that young people that may be born in poverty, immigrants, whatever the case is, they're not getting, what they deserve. They're not getting the very best. And I think that's a big problem. And so, listen, man, any system where you can look at third grade reading levels and then predict how many prisons need to be built, I would say that system has some flaws.
So you grew up in the Bay Area, in Oakland, and you went to 11 schools. What did you see? What do you think is the challenges these schools are facing?
I think they're facing a bunch of different ones. I think that around what the priorities are. So, for instance, a lot of people like to talk about Kentucky in a bad way. I used to live in this place called Paducah, Kentucky, but they were so adamant about reading, like making us do reading competitions and reading out loud, things like that. So when I got to my school in Oakland, I had this really thick Kentucky accent. It was very thick, hard to understand. But it almost resulted in me being put in special education. And so I got lucky because on Thursdays was read out loud day. And it came my turn to read. And I stood up and read, and I was the best reader in the class. So in that moment, I went from being earmarked to go to a special education class to then being a part of the GATE program, the Gifted and Talented program. And that's flippant, man. Like that is so irresponsible. But that was just the luck of the draw. So some things that these schools are missing is a level of stability where you can also like have the amount of rigor and scrutiny that is, required if you're educating the masses. I think that when you go to a poor school and a poor community, I don't think there is a high level of academic accountability and rigor. And that's part of the thing we're going to talk about today, which is inflated grades. I graduated with a 3.83 something high. I graduated really, really well. I had A's and B's and AP English classes, but then I was in remedial English when I went to university. The same with math. And I think that that's a problem. And so what I try to do is I'll always push the system, brother, always. But I tell parents and students that you have to have enough knowledge on your end to push them and get what you need. So when you get that report card and that report card says an A and you're a parent, say, thank you, that I'm glad the kid got an A. Is my child proficient? Are they reading on grade level? And if they're not, what's the plan to get them on grade level? What do I need to be doing outside of this classroom? How do we work together? So
you went through this experience. You had a really good GPA, and then you went to college. You realized your level of reading and math is not adequate compared to the GPA you had. Do you think this is common nowadays in Oakland schools?
I think it's common all throughout the country, but absolutely in Oakland. It's common because there are societal pressures that get put on schools, and Oakland's one of them. I think the Office of Civil Rights had to come in one time because of suspensions. And so what then happens is, well, schools will stop suspending. They'll do in-school suspension, right? The numbers will look different. I think that when you talk about how poorly Black kids or brown kids are performing as far as graduation is concerned, then grades get inflated sometimes and you graduate more young people, but the proficiency or them being able to go to college and thrive in college isn't always there. I do think that people are trying hard. I've worked in the district. I know a lot of those people. I know a lot of educators that give it their all every single day. And yet and still, we are still very, very far behind. I don't blame students. I don't blame parents per se. I think that we spend a lot of time on blame instead of just like, what is the issue? But if that many young people, if 2 or 3 out of 10 young Black kids are reading on grade level, we have a problem. We have a serious issue. And that conversation needs to be had, not for political gain, not for clout, not to, not to put adults in better positions, but how do we actually solve this type of issue? Because here's the thing. If I didn't graduate from high school, if I didn't get into college, if I didn't graduate from college and, fall into becoming a doctor, whatever the case is, I know that my life would have turned out very different. There are absolutely more men in my family that have been to jail than have been to college. That's just a fact of my life and of my family. I visited my own mom and dad in jail before, and God bless, they're doing great now. They got clean when I was in middle school. But not to belabor the point, I think if their education would have been different, I think if their economic opportunities as a result of that education would have been different, I don't think I would have had to visit both my parents in jail and live in and out of shelters and systems and things like that.
Our report shows if schools in Oakland continue improving at the rate that they're improving at, it's going to take 4 generations for kids to be at grade level.
Wow.
Unacceptable. Unacceptable.
Why are so many people leaving California? It wasn't long ago, people from everywhere wanted to move to the Golden State to enjoy a better life. Sadly, the standard of living has been dropping in the past decade. Are you like me and wonder why this is happening? I'm Siyamak, host of California Insider. In our film, Leaving California, The Untold Story, I take you an intimate journey of love, loss, tragedy, and hope as residents face the prospect of leaving their beloved state. Everyday people like you tell their stories about why they have to move out of the state even though they don't want to. Experts and policymakers also give insights about what's happening behind the scenes. Together, we get to the root cause of this exodus. Go to leavingcalifornia.com to view the first 15 minutes of the film for free. By watching Leaving California, you can be part of the solution. Again, go to leavingcalifornia.com.
You have your own story. Can you tell us more about how you got into the education
Yeah,
system?
absolutely. Well, I'm a child of Oakland. I've lived in Oakland since I was 7 years old. I went to public schools in my neighborhood, and I was a really good student up until I made the big transition to high school. And I got very distracted. I fell in with a different crowd, and I just stopped going to school. I would be out in the streets, hanging out, and really unfocused on my schoolwork. And I also had teachers who I just remember just not being very supportive or encouraging. And so I just kind of felt like they had a bad attitude, I had a bad attitude, so I would just do whatever I felt like doing. No one really noticed. Nobody called home that year. So basically my grades went from A's to D's, and I was failing all my classes by the end of 10th grade. So at that time, I made the decision to drop out of high school. And instead of finishing and graduating with my peers, going to prom, I went to work. And I went out and worked for a couple years, and I realized I couldn't get ahead. I really needed to go to college. But when I started going to community college, when I was finally ready and I had the mindset to go to school, I was so behind academically. I didn't know how to write an essay. I didn't know how to do, entry-level college math. So I had to remediate. And it was very, very difficult, those years I spent at community college. So that experience showed me we've got to kids only have one chance at a public education, right, and a great education. And we've got to catch them the first time, that they're in the system. And I got into education because I don't want to see kids like me who are bright, full of potential, but nobody notices when they're checked out of school. We have to have schools that really take responsibility and partner with every kid and every family to make sure that they're successful.
Do you think the schools now are worse than when you were attending, or is it the same?
When I started teaching, schools were kind of like big factories. In the low-income neighborhoods, there was year-round schools. You didn't have your own classroom. Teachers shared classroom because there was so much overcrowding. This was a terrible situation, and Oakland actually addressed that. Parents got really angry and organized, and Oakland started opening charter schools, but also they had their autonomous schools that they opened within the district to really be alternatives to those very, very low-performing schools where kids were not getting a good education and teachers were not having a good experience either. So some of those things are better, I would say, right? Because there was some bold leadership and courageous leadership, and we focused, right, on that change initiative for several years and really saw some great outcomes. But then I think some things are worse. There's a lot more absenteeism among students, since the pandemic. Kids weren't coming to school. That was very detrimental to a lot of the students, to not be around their peers, to not be in a classroom. So many kindergartners trying to read on a Zoom lesson. It was very bad for kids.
And now, in terms of the funding,
Sure.
I've always been puzzled because the funding amount we are spending in California is almost $23,000, a little bit more than $23,000 per kid per year, which used to be $10,000
Right.
like 10 years ago or
Yeah.
12 years ago per kid per year. So we have invested a lot more in the public education. What's going on with the funding?
Yeah.
Where does it go?
Part of what California is doing right now is really embracing a community schools model where it's not just the academic needs that are attended to in the school, right? There's social emotional supports, there's mental health supports, there's even health clinics in our schools. There's a great new model of linked learning where kids are getting career internships when they're in high school, they're doing work-based learning.
While we're having the issue with proficiency, while we're not doing the basics.
Correct.
Can you show us like where funding is misused?
The way funding works in California is there's always attempts to make the funding go to the things that really matter. One challenge I would say in Oakland is for the number of students we have in our city, we have 120 public schools, district and charter. We have a huge number of public schools. To have a robust and thriving school, you've got to have enough students to generate the kind of budget where you can have a really great program. You can have instructional coaches for your teachers. You can have a great after-school program. You can have planning time for teachers. All these things that help put the conditions in place for your teachers to be successful and your students to also excel. But in schools where we have very few students and we choose to keep those schools open, they're not able to provide a robust program. It's kind of like the bare bones, the skeleton. And we end up supplementing, right, from the general fund to keep those schools open. This is at a huge cost to our kids. Every year that we have schools where the vast majority, 80-90% of the kids are not reading at grade level, 50% of the kids aren't reading at grade level, there's such a cost that's borne by every student in that school and every family in that school. What we're saying is we probably need a different structure for our schools, to not have all these tiny schools that are just barely kind of getting the doors open every day and not having the kind of robust supports and programs that really make a school vibrant and successful.
And the costs for these schools are really high, right?
It can be very high. It can be up to $60,000 plus that is spent per student at those schools.
Wow.
Yeah. So if we had less schools, it means to me we can invest more in those schools, right? And we can really make them vibrant hubs where the community and parents really want to send their kids. But when we're just kind of keeping the status quo of having a lot of schools, I always just think, who's that for? Is that better for students? Right? And it's not.
Do you have any other thoughts for our audience?
I think the thought I would like to leave our audience with is our organization, Families in Action for Quality Education, we believe part of the reason we have such inequitable results, we have such big gaps between our different groups of students, is because underserved families have been left out of the conversation. So I challenge everyone to think about how is it that we're making a place how are we inviting the families, Black families, brown families, low-income families, into the conversation about what they want for their kids and how our schools can deliver on that.
Kimi, you say they're left out, but there's a lot of talk about them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
All the messaging is about how the schools are going to help the low-income families and Black and brown kids. Is it just talk? Is it not really happening?
There's a fundamental tension and disconnect where I hear so many of these progressive values stated all the time about how people are, pro-Black, pro-immigrant, they're embracing, they want everyone to succeed, but our actions as leaders need to line up to that. And when we are leaving 80% of our Black and brown students behind and out of reading at grade level, those actions don't match up with the words. We have to hold ourselves accountable to making sure if we believe that all kids can succeed, we're doing the things that are in our control, we're exercising our agency and actually making that happen.
So there's a lot of talk around this, but no action, no real
Not
action.
enough. Don't you think when we have those kind of stats, it's alarming. You were shocked when you heard it. We had to start publishing a citywide report to put it in print. What is happening for our kids, right? Because no one's talking about it. Decision makers aren't talking about it. Policymakers aren't talking. There's no public accountability for it. So we want to make sure that there is accountability to our families, right? And to our kids for these kind of results. We have to do better. So we have to say, it's not just the talk, but we've got to walk the walk. And we've got to make what seems like it might be impossible, we got to make that possible. Because how do you move forward in a city when 80% of your majority populations
won't be able to read and do math?
Right.
And then in the future, what will happen to that city?
And how do they enter the workforce? How do they enter high-skilled jobs in the workforce without that kind of preparation, right? We're setting ourselves up for even a worse disaster in the future if we don't deal with this together.
Kimi Kean with Families in Action for Quality Education. It was great to have you on California Insider.
Thank you. Great to be here.
We have an exciting news for you. At California Insider, we created a new product. It's called California Insider Opinion. This is where our insiders and experts across the state are actually telling you what's going on behind the headlines. When there's a breaking news, a big issue, important issue happening in California, they're gonna come on the screen and tell you what's happening behind the scenes. And these are like 7 to 10 minutes of opinion formats where the guests are talking to the camera directly, telling you what's happening.
You're paying a tax increase of tens of thousands of dollars every year as a condition of keeping what you already own.
Make sure to look at the description below because you want to sign up on our newsletter because a lot of these opinions might be very sensitive that some people in the social media platforms may not like. So we're putting them in the newsletter on our website so you can have them. These opinions will actually help you understand the political and policy landscape of California. We highly recommend you follow it.